The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay. Hi. You guys have any questions for me before I move on? Alright. So here we go. Can we so we'll start doing some questions first. Alright. So the first question goes here. Can we have the constructor as a private? If yes, what is the significance of it? What is the impact of it? I repeat the question. Can we have constructor as a private? If yes, what is the impact? Yeah. So classes cannot be instantiated. Okay. Here we go. I go for a class. Let's say box. Or we go with something. Database connection. Now, what? Okay, it's not. This doesn't make sense. So because normally I don't go with database connection. Let me create a class as a box. Now it got a constructor. Normally we go with a constructor. What is constructor? Method which got the same name as class name. Method which got the same name as class name. So let me have some instance variables here. Length, breadth, and the height. Now this constructor takes parameters. Then constructor is used to initialize the instance members. It is used to initialize the instance members. Right. Now I will be creating a class called another one called run with a main method. Now within this I will be able to create object of the box, class box. Right. But the moment I make it as a constructor as a private, the moment I make the constructor as a private, I won't be able to create the object of the class outside the class. So we can use private keyword with the constructor, but what is the impact? The impact is it won't allow you to create object of a class outside the class. It won't allow you to create object of the class outside the class. So my next question would be, what is the significance of this? Why would someone or anyone will go for private constructor? Would you like to take a guess? Why people need a private constructor? Why do we need a private constructor? Why do we need a private constructor? Right? So there is something called as a design pattern called Singleton design pattern. There is something called as a design pattern called Singleton design pattern. So every time I create an object, if you observe here, I created a box 1, so I have 4 objects, box 2, box 3, box 4. So what exactly happens is, every time you create an object, the instance members memory allocation happens. That is, memory allocation happens. So you created a box object 4 times, then 4 objects are being instantiated. Now there is something called as a Singleton design pattern. There is something called as a Singleton design pattern. So what they do is, this is what they do. If box is null, they create a new object and they make the constructor as a private. If it is not null, they return the box which is already existing. They return the box which is already existing. Or you can simply say here, you don't need to write else block. You can simply say return the box. So what constructor you have? Private constructor. So what are you doing outside is, you are not allowing others to create object. 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 Because the moment you have a private constructor, you won't be able to create an object of it. You won't be able to create an object of it. You won't be able to create an object of it. Now simple, if you need an object, what you do next time is, you call the getBox method. Now what is this getBox method doing? The getBox method is checking whether the box instance is null or not. If it is null, then it creates a new box and returns. Otherwise it returns the existing box. But in order to use this singleton design pattern, what one need to do? In order to use this singleton design pattern, first one should prevent creation of the objects outside the class. Because if you don't prevent the people from creating the object, nobody is going to use this getBox. Suppose if you make it as a public, if you make the constructor as a public, why anybody will be interested in doing this? They will be happy in doing this. They will be happy in doing this. But what happens when you keep doing this? Every time you invoke the statement, it creates a new object. And you might be using this box. You might be using this box object for a couple of times or maybe n number of times. Suppose if you are using 10 objects, then 10 times the memory allocation happens. So they don't want to create the object again and again, because every time you create the object, you are consuming the memory. So they introduce something called as a singleton design pattern. So every time you need an object, you won't be creating a new one. You will be ensuring first whether the object exists or not. If it exists, get that object. If it doesn't exist, create a new one. Then I have written a method. I check whether the box object exists or not. If yes, I return that object. If no, then I create a new object. But if you have to encourage people to use this, if you want to encourage people to use this, then what? You should not allow them to create object. How do you stop them from creating the object? Make the constructor as a private. The moment you make the constructor as a private, nobody will be able to create the object. When they were unable to create the object, then use the other option by invoking the getBox method. Now what is your getBox method will do? Your getBox method will check whether the object already exists or not. If it exists, it returns the same object. If it doesn't exist, it creates a new object and returns for you. And this is the advantage of constructors being private. You can ensure that the singleton design pattern is forced. You can ensure that singleton design pattern is forced on the people when we use constructor as a private. If you don't make constructor as a private, then people will have the luxury of creating the objects. But if you have to ensure that people use the singleton design pattern, then declare the constructors as a private. Then that won't give the options for the other programmers to create the object outside the class. Then they start relying on this singleton design pattern. Guys, any question on this part, or is it clear? The singleton design pattern and the purpose of making the constructors as private. The purpose of making the constructors as a private. All right. So we did one question. The question was, can we declare constructors as private? And what is the significance or what is the impact of it? So let me do the next question. Can we declare the class as private or protected or package friendly? I mean, if you observe here, you see the class box and the access specifier for the class is public. Can I have a class without public? Can I have a class with private? Can I have a class with protected? Any guesses? Can we declare the class as a private or protected or package friendly? If no, justify, or if yes, justify, or whatever. No, because JVM cannot access it. Yeah. Okay. So let's see what all the problems we have. See, if I use protected, then it gives me a compile time error. As it was suggested that you cannot access it, that is correct too. So when you take the mouse over, it says invalid modifier protected for class. So for the class, what all the modifiers are permitted? Public, abstract, final is permitted. What about the static? Static is also not permitted. So when it comes to a class, so what are the only keywords? Public is allowed, abstract is allowed, final is allowed. Now what is allowed, what is not allowed? What is not allowed? Private is not allowed, protected is not allowed, static keyword is also not allowed. Static keyword is also not allowed. Static keyword is also not allowed. Alright. So private and protected, why they are not allowed? Because if you declare the class as a private in a package, now, okay, I have a desktop. Okay, now here only we do it. If you declare a class as a private in a package, will it be able to be, can we access it outside the package? Can we access it outside the package? No, because there is a problem, you have something called your JVM architecture. In your JVM architecture, your class loader will load the .class files. But if you make it as a private, how your class loader will be able to load your .class files? So you have all the concerns. So your private and protected is not allowed. Private and protected is not allowed, whereas no access specifier is allowed. When I say no access specifier, it is nothing but package friendly. Private is not allowed, protected is not allowed. Now here, let me open a notepad. Then here we go. File save. Then here, I want to create a class. Let's say hello world. On the desktop, I have a class called hello world. I'm sorry. I'm not sure what is the access specifier I gave. Let me check. It's a plain notepad, I think. Let me delete this. So desktop. So if you observe this, hello world is the message. Let me quickly go to the command prompt, move on to the desktop, then let me set the path. C drive, we got a program files, KDK, bin. When I say Java C hello world.java, it got compiled, right? You got a dot class file here. I delete that. Now what I do is I go back and I change the class name. The file name is hello world. I just change the class name to world. Now you see the message here. When you are declaring the class as a public, it should be with the same file name. If you are declaring the class as a public, the class name and file name must match. So this point one need to remember, when you are defining a class as a public, ensure that the class name and file name is same. That is the reason when you are trying to create a file over here, when you try to create a Java file over here, right? When you try to create a Java file, see what is the access specifier by default here? Public. Or you can also pick default. You can also pick default. When you pick default, the class name and file name need not to be same. When you pick default, the class name and file name need not to be same, but when you pick public, the class name and file name must be same. And if you see the private keyword and the protected keyword, we cannot select them, because you cannot have the class as a private and protected. You cannot declare class as private and protected, and even you cannot make it as a static. You cannot make it as a static. You can make only public, default, abstract, final, but you cannot have your classes as private, protected, and static. But there is a concept called inner classes. There is a concept called inner classes. Now, just read about these inner classes. Now, you can make them as, your inner classes can also be private. They can also be protected. They can also be static. Now, what do you mean by these inner classes? What do you mean by these inner classes? A class inside a class is called as your inner class. A class inside the class is called as inner classes. So here, if you have a class something like this, public class outer, then within this you can have a inner class as public or protected, nothing, or private, class, inner. So you can have your inner classes as public, protected, private, and package friendly. And your inner classes can also be static. The inner classes can also be static. Outer classes cannot be static, whereas your inner classes can be static. So you can write a class inside a class. One can write a class inside a class, and the inner classes can be static, inner classes can be private, inner classes can be protected. Inner classes can be private, can also be private, protected, and static. I have an assignment for you. The assignment is, what is the significance of inner classes? You just need to understand the significance of inner classes, or what is the advantage of having the inner classes, why we need to go for inner classes. So what else? Any question would you like to suggest? Okay, think about some other questions. Next, the significance of inner classes is there. Okay. Yeah, I think we already discussed this. Why multiple inheritance? Why multiple inheritance is not supported? Why multiple inheritance is not supported? The reason was very simple reason. You got a class A, and the class A got a method called get, and you got another class called B, it also got a method called get. You got a class called C. Imagine that this is supported. This is not supported in Java. If you are extending A and B, and you got a method here. Now from this method you are trying to call get. Now there is an ambiguity here. Which get method gets called? Which get method gets invoked? Is it from the A or is it from the B? Is it from the A or is it from the B? So this is the reason the multiple inheritance is not supported. Next question. While overriding, we focus on, what is overriding? Overriding is what? Defining a method in child, defining a method in child with same name as in parent is called overriding. Now this is the definition of overriding. Now what are the things we remember? Do we need to focus on access specifier? Do we need to focus on access specifier? Do we need to focus on arguments? Do we need to focus on return type while overriding? This is important. Can we declare a class? No. Inside a method you cannot do it. You cannot declare a class inside a method. But we have something called anonymous implementations. We have something called anonymous implementations. I think we did one of the example of anonymous implementation while doing comparable or something. We cannot declare a class inside a method. Inside a method you cannot declare a class. Inside a method you cannot define another method also. So can I have answers for this? Do we need to focus on access specifier? If yes, what we should focus on? Do we need to focus on arguments? I'll answer this. While overriding, arguments must match. I mean arguments in parent method, or you can say while overriding the signature, that is the arguments must be same. Arguments must be same. So I answered one. So there are two questions which are not answered. One is, do we need to focus on the access specifier? Do we need to focus on the return type? Access specifier must be the same or privilege can be more. Perfect. Yes. While overriding, right, access specifier either should remain same or should increase. Right? Suppose in the parent class, let's go back to the here. Overriding, you have a parent class, parent, put method, print method. You got a child class, you got a get method and a print method. I think we did that activity. Let's do that activity. There I discussed, it was day 8, what was the day 9? Day 9 was the assignment. If you look at this, iVehicle is an interface, and by default the methods of the interface are what? Public. So there was a vehicle which was implementing the iVehicle interface, and while overriding we ensured that the access specifier is same. If you can see, start engine, public access specifier. If I try to change it to protected, compile time error. If I try to change it to nothing, compile time error. If I change it to private, compile time error. But if it is public, it should remain same or it should increase. It should remain same or it should increase. Perfect. So the access specifier should remain same while overriding. While overriding, the access specifier should remain same or the privilege should increase. Right. Now the next, do we need to focus on return type? Do we need to focus on the return type? Is return type going to bother the overriding or no? So here we go. Let me create a class called parent, and let me create a class called child. Now in the parent class, I am defining a method public. In the parent class, I am defining a method public, return type is parent, fine. Now in the child class, I am again defining a method get. Now I put the access specifier as a parent, no problem. I put the access specifier as a child, no problem. Now what do you say? Is it still overriding or it's not overriding? Okay, let me add one more. I create a class, then I say grandparent. Alright, okay, I didn't have any inheritance here, right? So let me do parent extends grandparent. Now your child extends what is happening in the parent class, you have a get method whose return type is parent. The child class is extending the parent. It also got a method get and whose return type is child. Now here I am trying to change the return type to grandparent. Now what it says here, the return type is incompatible. The return type is incompatible. But when I change it to child, now what is your observation on this? How you want to conclude this? To prevent runtime error, return type must be same. But here when I try to change the return type, there is no complaint, right? So if you look at this parent and the child, I have this, okay, and when I try to change it to parent, there is no problem. The only problem arises when I try to do this grandparent, because yeah, as you said, to prevent the errors at runtime, that was correct. The reason being, a parent can hold the address of the child. A parent can hold the address of the child. That is, if you take the run program again here, what I can do, we know what is overriding, what is dynamic polymorphism. I can create an object of the child, then on the child I can call what method? Get method. Then I can assign it to child reference. Oh, what I have here? If I have this, no problem. But will I be able to do this? You should be able to do this, because what is the return type of this get method? Child. So on the child object you are calling get method, but still you are able to assign it to parent, because the child is what? It's a child class of the parent here. So that is the reason while overriding you can ignore this. But here at runtime there will be a problem then. You should hold it to parent reference. So this is not my agenda. I am not interested in discussing this. What I am interested in this is while overriding, what you should remember. Do we need to focus on the return type? Yes. Return type can be, what we need to ensure? We have to ensure that return type is compatible. Compatible with what? Parent. You have to ensure that your return type is compatible with parent. So you can change the return type, but when you are changing the return type, you have to ensure that is that return type compatible with the parent class return type. Parent class method return type. Parent class method return type. That is one thing. Next thing is we get back to the normal thing. Now in the parent I have a return type as a int. Right. In the parent I have a return type as a int. Now while overriding I cannot do it. But can I do it to long here? No. In the parent it was int. In the child it was long. Right. This is not possible. In the parent it was int. In the child it was long. What it says? It's not compatible. Now this seems to be fine. But let me go back to the parent. I do the vice versa. Now what is the problem here? It says incompatible, right? So while overriding, you have to ensure that return type should be same when you are working on the fundamental data types. If you see, the child return type is int, whereas in the parent the return type is long. Whereas long is higher privilege. I mean long is what? Long can store a 8-bit of values. The long memory size is 4 bytes. Whereas long memory size is 8 bytes. Int is only 4 bytes. So the parent is having a long and child is having what? Int. But still it says it's incompatible, right? But if a child makes long and parent makes int, child is long and parent makes int, that is also not possible. Says incompatible. So when it comes to your fundamental data types, you have to ensure that they are same. When it comes to fundamental data types, you have to ensure that they are same. So when I say return type is compatible with the parent class with the return type, so there are two things. One is primitive data type, your fundamental. The other one is your abstract. When I say abstract, your class, right? Class names. When it comes to primitive data types, they must be same. When it comes to abstract class names, right? So what they can be? Return type must be same, or it can be child classes of the parent return type. It can be child classes of the parent return type. Hope this is clear for you. Then let's move on to the next question. Yeah, you guys got any question? Now what is this anonymous implementation? We already spoke about this anonymous implementation. Now what is this anonymous implementation? Now normally you have interfaces. Now interfaces will have what? Abstract methods. Interfaces will have what? Abstract methods. So we all know what is interface. Interface is a collection of abstract methods. Now if you're gonna use this, if you are implementing a class, suppose you know a class X implements I interface, then interface I got methods. So you override, what do? You override the methods of I. When you override the methods of I, now this X class is reusable. Now you can use this X class for n number of times. You can use this X class for n number of times. You can use this X class for n number of times. When you know that this X class is needed for n number of times, then do this implementation. But if you think that we're not going to use this for n number of times, then what you can do is, but actually this is not allowed. You cannot create object for interface. One cannot create object for interface. But what I'm doing is, I'm not ending with a semicolon, rather I'm opening the parenthesis. Now within this I will be overriding all the methods. I will be overriding all the methods. I will be overriding all the methods of the interface. Now what happens? Whatever the methods you define here, they will be of use only till this point. They will be of use only till this point. You cannot use them later. So that's the reason we call them as anonymous implementation. So the usage at the point of you define them at the point of use. Anonymous implementation. So this anonymous implementation is not only for interface, it's also applicable for abstract classes. Also applicable for abstract classes. Anonymous implementations also applicable for abstract classes. Next question. What is the significance of hash code? What is the significance of hash code? Hash code is a method. Hash code is a method. It belongs to object class. What is the significance of this? Hash code is a method. It belongs to java.lang.object. What is the significance of this? Yes. What it does is it returns a unique address assigned to an object. It returns a unique address assigned to an object. So what is hash code is it returns a unique address assigned to object. So whenever we use a new operator to create object of the class, hash code method gives a unique code, a unique code value or unique numeric value, for identifying each object. Right. Now, I'll tell you the significance of this. If we go back to the collection framework, not sure. Yeah, here we go. Set demo on day 12, or I think I can also do it here in today's what is today's class? It's day.20. Yeah. Let me quickly create a class called student. Now in this, let me quickly put an ID. Then get the getters and setters. Then also have the constructor. Yeah. Then Let's get back to the run.java. Here I'm creating a set of type student. I'm using a hash set of type student. Import. Now let me add some objects to the student. Now we know that set don't allow duplicates. We know that set don't allow the duplicates. So I'm adding some objects to it. 3, but I'm adding one again with Arun. Now if you observe, I have 4 students. Then let me determine the size. I'm just printing the size here. Now what is the size you see there? You see the size as a 4, right? You see the size as a 4 there. The reason you see the size as a 4 because there are 4 objects. There are 4 objects. Let me do this actually to have. There are 4 objects. But there are 2 objects which are same. So let me do this one here. Student 1 is student 2, student 3, student 4, 1002, 1003, 1004. No, 1003 and 1001 is Arun again. So what I'm going to do is student set dot add student 1, student set dot add student 2, student set dot add student 4, so student set dot add student 3. Now it is giving 4 students, but actually it should not give 4 students, it should give only 3 because there is 2 students with the same ID and the same name. The reason why it is not happening because if I try to print the hash code of every student, when I try to print the hash code of every student, let's see what happens. You see, there are 4 different values. So when you use new operator, a different hash code gets generated. When you use new operator, different hash code gets generated. Since all the 4 objects are sharing 4 unique hash code values, So it is allowing. But if I try to add student 3 again, it won't do that. It won't allow student 3. Why it won't allow student 3? Because they are sharing the same name. They are sharing the same hash code. Since the hash code is same, it won't allow. As long as the hash code is different, it is allowing. But now, do we need to work on hash code? Do we need to check for equality on hash code? Do we need to check for equality on hash code? No, I don't want to check for equality on hash code. I want to check for equality on the student ID. I want to check for equality on student ID. So what I'm supposed to do is, in the student.java class, right click, source, override or implement methods, equals and hash code. Now what I do is, this hash code method is there. It was generating a separate hash code every time, right? Now I'll ensure that it gives the same hash code every time. It is returning 0. I'm overriding the hash code method. Every time it's gonna gives you 0. Then only overriding hash code will not do the job. Along with the hash code, you also need to override the equals method. Now what I do is, since hash code method is overridden to null and it is returning 0 every time, now in the equals method, I'll write the logic on what basis I want to do it. Right, I want to check for equality. So what should be the equality condition? If O dot, or it's not O, if ID is equal to the student ID, return true. Otherwise return false. Now I have changed the logic. Now you go back and run the program and observe the change. Hash code is 0000, and what is your strength? What is your size of the set? The size of the set is only 3. It is not allowing this record again. It is not allowing student 4. Student 1, student 2, student 4 is allowed. Student 3 it is, student 1, student 2, student 4 is, no. Student 1, student 2, student 3 is allowed, not student 4, because student 4 and student 1 are sharing the same ID. And this is what the significance of your hash code and equals method. And you know what is the significance of hash code? And you know what is the problem if you use the hash code? If you use the built-in hash code method in the case of set, when you are using your set, array list set or collection framework set, it checks for duplicates basing on the hash code, but I don't want it to check for duplicate basing on the hash code. Rather, I want it to check basing on the student ID. So what I did, I have overridden the hash code method and equals method. I cannot say exactly the memory address. You can take it as yes, it is returning the memory address, but because in Java actually we don't deal with memory addresses. So we actually not bothered whether it is a memory address or not. You can, rather than calling it as a memory address, it is better you call it as it's a unique value for every object. It's a unique value for every object. Because we don't do any pointer arithmetic, we don't do any address arithmetic, right? So we are not sure whether it's a memory address or it's a unique value for every object. Yeah, any other question with respect to the hash code and equals method or anything? Or if you want any question to be discussed? Right, then let me list down a few more questions. You have something called uh, vector, right? Now, these questions are very, very important. What is the difference between vector and array list? And difference between linked list and array list? Why order is not guaranteed when in hash set? In hash set, if you are storing the data in 1, 2, 3, then there is no guarantee that you get it you get it back as 1, 2, 3. You may get it as 2, 1, 3, 3, 2, 1, or 1, 2, 3. Why that order is not guaranteed in hash set? Then there is something called, this is a prominent question too, difference between hash map and hash table, right? Difference between the hash map and hash table. There is something called fail path. This is also important. There is something called TDD. One need to understand what is this test-driven development. And there is other one called design by contract. And differences between the hash map and hash table, list and vector. Yeah. There is something called, for collection framework, alright, for some of the collection frameworks, not everyone. For some of collection framework, there is an initial capacity. Normally I said collection framework, they are all dynamic in size. But for some of them there is something called initial capacity. So once initial capacity is reached, how they get incremented? Once the initial capacity is reached, how they get incremented? And once the initial capacity is reached, how they get incremented? And yeah, there is one more call, difference between class not found exception and no class definition found error. No class definition found. Right. So what is the difference between them? Now, what exactly happens? In class.forName? You say class.forName, you pass string argument, or you actually pass a class name in double quotes. Right, you pass a class name in double quotes. What is this? Oracle.jdbc.driver. Oracle driver. Oracle driver is a class name. But what exactly happens in this? And there is one, this question I already shaded actually. What is the difference between JVM, JDK and JRE, how they are different. And there is something called JIT, just in time. What is the significance of it? And then you need to know differences between the checked exception and checked and unchecked exception. And yeah, differences between the checked exception and unchecked exception. And you also need to remember the exception hierarchy, not to the ground completely, but at least the top level you should be able to remember hierarchy. Right. So then we discussed a lot of things, right? Comparable and comparator we discussed. Difference between comparable. Yeah, then comes here, this is the next thing. Mutable and immutable. Then there is something called differences between, there is a string buffer and there is a string builder. What is the difference between the three? Differences between the string buffer and the string builder. Now, what is serializable? Now, if I don't know whether you observed it or not, if you make any class implement serializable, if you make any class implement serializable, it gives you a warning. And when I try to fix the warning, what is the significance of this serial version? Right? This is important actually. Right? It was that. What is the significance of serializable? And when we implement interface and implement serializable interface, what is the significance of this? Then why the constants are public, static and final? Why they need to public, static and final? Public is okay, why they need to be static and final? Why the constants need to be static and final? Mostly you see constants as static and final, but why they need to be static and final? And what are the other marker interfaces? What are the other marker interfaces? One of the example is serializable. Then there is something called remote, I think. It belongs to java.rmi. We don't need it actually because we don't use that RMI anymore. Means explicitly we don't use RMI. What are the other marker interfaces? Some of the examples are serializable and remote. And why do we need marker interfaces? What is the significance of marker interfaces. What is the significance of marker interfaces? Right. We can have. I will be giving you a few more questions actually. Right. Then again, we already discussed these things. Why the main need to be public, static, and with string array as parameters. Why it need to be with string array as arguments? What is the significance of class loader in JVM, garbage collector, right? I'll be sharing a few more questions in the next, probably I'll be emailing you the few more questions. Right. So these are the things which you need to, you guys need to know the answers. And most of them we discussed actually in the class. And for the remaining you can find the answers. If not, let me know. I'll be helping you with the answers. Or if you have any questions, we'll discuss over that. Yeah. Any questions for me? All right. I appreciate even if you guys can come up with some questions which we can discuss in the class. All right. And every day we can give some 5 to 10 minutes after the session for answering, or you guys can share the questions, or you guys can share the answers. All right. We'll have a discussion on it. All right. Okay. If you guys have no questions, I would like to stop here. And tomorrow, I'll be discussing the concurrent programming and following it with HTML. Okay, if you guys have no questions, we'll stop here. We'll catch you in the next session then.